Carolina, a group of 22 of us, to a kibbutz that was reestablished in 1974.
Not all from North Carolina.
Yeah, there was no one else. There was one other person from North Carolina. It was a Habonim group. There was no Habonim in North Carolina. I wasn't in Habonim, but that's a story for another day. Yes, Lee, Siegel, my uniform. Keith's brother. Keith. I tell people he's been in more synagogues over the last 6 months. You'll be very surprised to understand that he's been all over the world. This picture of Keith, the in between the eyes red dot, is actually, they have 4 children. Their youngest, Shia, daughter, they had an engagement party a few weeks before October 7th, where the 2 families got together. They hadn't met, the parents hadn't met. And among other themes of henna, and he got a tika. He likes India, they like India. So you can just get a closer look of Keith. And this album, have you all been to Hostage Square?
Yeah.
You've heard about the forum? So, 2.5 months in, of the what was 240 hostages, there's a subset of families that have American citizenship. I have American citizenship. Keith has American citizenship. And we are sort of a family within a family, the American citizens. And within that, I'm probably telling you things you already know, but there's 3 soldiers, 2 of which are what are called Chayal Boded, a lone soldier, but they're here without family. So actually all of them are Israelis, 2 of the families. One lives in Long Island and one lives in Tenafly, New Jersey. So the families are there and the sons are here. One of them with the grandmother and one of them has a lot of family. And the other soldier, American, Itai Chen, they live in Netanya, and Itai 2 weeks ago was declared dead, killed on October 7th. His family has been very, very active. Ruby and Chagit Chen, and Ruby and a father from Long Island made a trip to Qatar, and the forum helped us put together this album. I'll pass it around. Of 6 of the 8 Americans, 2 of them, Judith and Gadi, were also killed on October 7th, although it took a while for the army to confirm that. Their children were pretty certain that, given what they knew happened, their parents are not alive. So the album originally was to be given to the Prime Minister of Qatar and one of the lead negotiators. This is who we are. Don't forget who we are. These are real people. Since that time, it has made its way to President Biden, Secretary Blinken, around the world. I don't know that it got to the Pope. One of the parents, Mom Rachel Goldberg-Polin, Hirsch's mom, met with the Pope quite a while ago. But it is everywhere that we can bring our story, the Americans in particular, it's there. So October 7th, as Steve said, around 6:30 in the morning, we live on the kibbutz, I think that's obvious. And in our house, we have a mamad, we have a safe room, little bomb shelter. Our son daughter-in-law and to their 2 children, our grandchildren, live across the path. They live in a house it doesn't have, and there's knocking on the door, and we're hearing noise and thinking that, oh, it's our neighbors slamming their doors. It was early enough in the morning on Saturday. After Hakafot on Friday, there was supposed to be Shacharit. 6:30 in the morning, we are sleeping, and knocking on the door, our son is saying there's sirens, and oh, there's a siren. When there's a siren in the area where the rockets are calculated to fall, there is no mistaking that that's your siren. When Gezer's siren goes off, kibbutz isn't big, but even if it was big, you know that that is for here. And a lot of noise, rockets, and Iron Dome intercepts. They come in, we go into the mamad, and we wait the 10 minutes you're supposed to wait after the siren stops, and you stop hearing booms. And we go out, and they go back to their house, and a few minutes later, we repeat that, and do that throughout the morning a number of times. After the first siren, we sent a WhatsApp message to Keith and Aviva, who live on Kfar Aza, as we have been doing for close to 20 years. No one could know how catastrophic what was going on in real time, but we have a lot of experience, they have a lot of experience, the South has a lot of experience with sirens and rockets. They have 15 seconds to get somewhere safe, we have 90 seconds. So a WhatsApp message to Keith and Aviva, we have a family group. We hope you're not at home. That is our usual message when this kind of thing happens. They have a son who lives on Kfar Aza, he's 40. He lives in his own house, and they have 3 daughters who live north. The last few years, the daughters have decided that too much trauma over the years and not a place to bring up our family. 2 have children. 1 is studying social work. She lives in Haifa, and 1 lives a little north of Afula, Kibbutz Kazit. So the message comes back that we're in our mamad, yeah, beseder, be okay. Again, no one could fathom where this is going. That continued for a few hours, 2.5 hours, until the WhatsApp, WhatsApps, there's 1 check when you send it, 2 checks if it's delivered, blue checks it. So we got to 1 check. A couple of hours in, and around the country, many people are experiencing that same. We hope that they just didn't bring their charger, that their phone lost charge, that anything but not the bad thoughts. Really, all over the place. And people are, throughout that day, being called up. We have a son, 41, he serves in intelligence unit. On that day, they were actually, because it was Chol HaMoed Sukkot and Simchat Torah, they were on a vacation, and he got, it's called a Tzav Shmone. You get this notice communicated to you, and you don't ask, but I'm on vacation, can I come later? So many families going through that experience. And we're in contact with their children, even Aviva's children, and not knowing what's going on. It took until the next day that the army communicated to the children that Keith's cell phone was located in Gaza. Later on, we heard from Aviva. Aviva was released on the 51st day, the 4th day of the only previous deal. That Keith actually hadn't taken his phone from the bedroom into the mamad. So when the terrorists came in and took them, they took what they took, and Keith's phone, they found it, they took it, and the army technologically somehow locates his phone, which means absolutely nothing. His phone could have been, on the top of Mount Everest. I mean, it's really that doesn't mean anything other than, along with a day and a half in the army finally getting to their house, there were battles, war on Kibbutz Kfar Aza for 5 days. So a day and a half took the army to get to Keith and Aviva's house. They live on the perimeter road. They're almost the last house, perimeter road. Security fence, pretty flimsy security fence, but a security fence. 2 kilometers of agricultural land, Gaza. So the army got to their house and communicated that Keith and Aviva are not in the house. This is a day and a half in of what ended up being close to 5 days of battles. That also didn't necessarily mean answer the question, where are Keith and Aviva? The next day, a neighbor who lives in a house that fronts a parking area where Keith, he works for a pharmaceutical company, would park his car that his employer provides. So this neighbor whose house fronts that parking area came forward and said, I saw Keith and Aviva being taken by Hamas terrorists along with a mom and 2 kids in his car. How this person was outside his house and saw that happen, it makes no sense, and why it took him 2 days to report that. Shock, trauma, but still, that's when we had some more confirmation that they were taken hostage. And then within a day after that, so 3 days in, a Hamas Telegram video clip had a frame of Keith's car being driven into Gaza with Keith and Aviva in the back seat. Not as though they were posing for a picture, but I mean, that is Keith and Aviva. Very clear. So that's 3 days. The forum, the non-governmental organization, came together within the first day, and within the first week they were in full gear with what ended up being, I think now they're close to 20,000 volunteers around the world, but thousands in Israel, that provide us with support from basically, you name it, from food through an area to just come together as families. And they had a meeting in an underground parking lot in Tel Aviv because we're a week into what's going on and no one is safe anywhere. And they presented themselves as, we have experience with negotiating, we have experience in security, we have experience in diplomacy, we're lawyers, we're doctors, we're gonna help you through this, because be prepared for it to take a long time. The government is in total chaos, no one knows what's going on, no one knows how many people are missing, no one knows how many people are missing and hostages, and no one knows how many people are missing and are not alive. Another story, like Itai Chen, the soldier, Vivian Silver, who was a member of Kibbutz Gezer for many years, and moved with her family, 2 sons, to Kibbutz Be'eri, quite a while ago. Vivian, very active in women wage peace, very active in Bedouin, trying to help in the Negev. Her 2 sons, the dad passed away a while ago. Her 2 sons went through a roller coaster of, your mom is missing, your mom is a hostage, because they located her cell phone in Gaza somewhere, and more than 2 months.
Yeah.
Your mom actually was murdered in her house on October 7th. So that just shows, first off, the level of atrocity that happened on October 7th, and throughout that day, and the inability of Israel to collect information and provide families with minimal support. There was no support. So we hear from this forum on that Friday, and the meeting is less than an hour because, again, we're underground. It's safe if anything falls, but the security was not what it needed to be to have so many people in one place. The government's first activity was to have the families provide DNA to the police. I did that for Keith. Aviva has a twin sister who did that for Aviva. The kids did that, and clothing was provided, toothbrush, from where they live. And then it's just days and days and days of not knowing what to do and not receiving information that's credible at all. It's even hard to remember back 6 months. It seems like 6 years ago, actually. But it's walking around as though your body's over here and your mind is over here, and you're just not. You're not functioning, but you're functioning because you wake up each day and you go and you talk to people and you interact with the United States government. Within a few days, the State Department was here with representatives of they have a special department for hostage release, the CIA, the FBI, and I imagine you all have heard that President Biden very quickly, there was a Zoom with families, and then he was here physically, and Secretary Blinken was here, and senators. We sat with Governor Hochul of New York in Jerusalem. She was here within 10 days. She'd never been to Israel. She's not Jewish. My connection to New York is I have a brother, we're 4 siblings, I have a brother who lives in Rochester, New York. But she was there, and beyond hugs, what I need to do, whatever I can do, please, here's phone numbers, and I'm mentioning this along with the senators because the Israeli government was nowhere. And I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it's very important to understand that for some, I can't even call them good reasons, but reasons that maybe you can, the first few days, the first week, the first couple of weeks, we were caught with our pants down. We have experienced atrocities. Revenge is the only thing that is moving most Israelis, and unfortunately also our government. Revenge, revenge, revenge. But what about us? What about the people who are suffering? What about the people who revenge is not going to bring our families home? Revenge is not going to bring the people who were murdered to a better place. So for many weeks, we are entertaining officials from abroad, and we are banging our heads against the wall of, we're becoming transparent. They don't see us. Translates better in Hebrew. And they are very, very opaque to us. The people who should be working for us are nowhere to be found. There's a senator, I'll get back to this story, but so I don't lose my train of thought. There's 2 senators, Joni Ernst from Iowa and Ted Budd from North Carolina. Because we're from North Carolina, he has taken on Aviva and Keith, and the state of North Carolina has the governor of North Carolina, Joni Ernst. These are people who I may not see a whole lot of common ground politically, but they come to Israel, they sit with the families, they talk with the government, Netanyahu and Gallant and the other people who are supposed to be the ones who have the authority and responsibility to do something. They are serving Israel and us as Americans. And when Senator Budd was in Israel, it was after Aviva had come back. And he was just overwhelmed at hugging and welcoming Aviva. And I'm trying to explain to Aviva, when these people tell you that they are here to serve, it's chaos in the United States politically, but the idea of service, it's foreign in Israel's culture of politics. It's a parliament, and there's not regions, there's only parties, and we have to beg to get someone's ear. And I cannot emphasize enough the support from the Biden administration and the fact that we've gotten to the point where President Biden, who knows Netanyahu better than anyone probably, has to go from pulling his hair out to, you know what, so we're going to abstain on that resolution. I totally understand it, and we're at our wits' end. A lot of the country is at its wits' end. We just don't know what to do when it's more important for the government to keep Haredim out of the army and win the war, whatever winning the war might be, than bringing back Keith and the other hostages. We say it's 134. It's clear that less than 100 of them are alive. And every day that goes by is another day that you can't be 6 months in captivity and be better the next day. Okay, I digress. We did whatever we could to try to keep awareness all over the world, but in particular in Israel, throughout a war environment. And this deal happened through diplomacy, through the United States, Qatar, Egypt, Israel, and the government agreed on a deal for 7 days with Hamas, and the government actually signed off on 10 days. If it could be, we understood from many people we had spoken to, you start negotiating and you get somewhere and you just keep pushing through. There's a certain momentum that can be gained. So Israel had actually signed off on 10 days. Days 8, 9, and 10 could have continued. On day 4, the mechanism was that Hamas provides a list of hostages that will be released the next day, and Israel provides a list of the prisoners, and that happens the next day. As Aviva tells the story, on the 3rd day, she didn't know that it was the 3rd day because they had no idea that there were negotiations. They had no idea that hostages were being released. On the 3rd day, she and Keith were together, and Hamas terrorist comes to her and says, "You Israel." And Aviva says, "What?" Not a lot of English, not a lot of Hebrew. She doesn't have much Arabic. Keith has some Arabic. "You Israel, tomorrow." She says, "What?" And he says, "You Israel, tomorrow." And she says, "Keith." He says, "Keith, tomorrow. Or, not tomorrow." She says, "I'm not going without Keith." "You Israel, tomorrow." And she says, "I'm going to say goodbye to Keith." He says, "No." She goes to the next room, says goodbye to Keith. And she tells her story that she said, "I will be strong for you, you be strong for me." And he says, "I will, and you need to go." But this is 50 days in captivity, and people that have been guarding you with guns and barely feeding you and moving you around 13 times in 51 days, below ground, above ground. This person's telling you Israel tomorrow, and they've been telling you there is no Israel, there is no Kfar Aza, everyone has been killed. When you leave Gaza, you're going to Europe or somewhere else, you're not going to Israel. this terrorist tells her, Israel, you tomorrow, and she leaves Keith and gets to a place where more hostages are being collected, many from Faraza, in fact. And she says that they had no idea really what was going to be. Eventually they get to the Red Cross. They're driven through an area more than likely Gaza City, but it's not entirely clear. I'm sure Israel at this point knows, but Aviva didn't. And she describes a scene where people, many people, and they're banging on the Red Cross door or window, or and there are video clips. You can see Aviva in the Red Cross vehicle, and you can see Aviva is holding a young child. This young child is Abigail. Abigail, 4-year-old, has American citizenship. Even for that, it took 4 days for Abigail, a 4-year-old, to be released, and Aviva is holding her. Aviva was born to be a kindergarten, nursery school caretaker, teacher. So we all, through 50 days, said Aviva is definitely taking care of little kids. Whether they're Israeli hostages or Gazan children, that is what she's doing. On her way out, so she's holding Abigail until her sore back didn't allow her, and she moved her to someone else. And Aviva, they get to the handoff to the army people, and then they are driven to an Air Force base, and Aviva is welcomed, they're all welcomed by social worker, army people, and one of the first things that Aviva hears is, your 4 children will be very happy, excited, loving to see you. And that was the first moment that she could understand that their son Shai, who was on Faraza in his own house, was actually alive. Let alone the 3 daughters who, who knows, all they're hearing she's hearing for 50 days is there is no Israel and everybody's being killed. And when they're moved through Gaza, they're told, see all this destruction? This is what your government is doing to our country. And when Keith and Aviva are sitting in a house and Israel is bombing, or rockets are coming out of Gaza into Israel, that is what hostages, Keith and Aviva in particular, because we know from Aviva, are experiencing for all this time. And while my children are alive, Keith, on the other hand, they weren't during that time exposed to radio or television or anything. There are hostages that say that they did get some news. Keith and Aviva were not. Who knows what Keith, 130 days almost later, has been exposed to, but there's no real good reason to think that he understands even that Aviva is home and safe. That was the 4th day. She was in the hospital for 2 days. We got there the morning that she eventually got to the hospital very, very late at night. The 4 kids were there, her twin sister was there, and we arrived the next morning. This orange band is to get into the hospital, the security, army, whatever, so families got an orange band. This was the 4th day. It came out of nowhere that Aviva was on a list and she was actually released. So naively or not, I thought, okay, so I'll save my band. Keith will be out. It can be 7 days, and Israel's already signed off on 10 days, so, we have time. There's 10 to 15 hostages being released every day, and Aviva was there for 2 days. She went with one of their daughters lives on a kibbutz north of Afula, kibbutz Gazit. That's who she went home with. 400 people on kibbutz Kfar Aza very quickly, as they were moved out, got to Kibbutz Shfaim. Different kibbutzim have different places where they were moved to. Some to Eilat. Be'eri was moved to Eilat. Nahal Oz is the kibbutz in the north, I think. Mishmar Emek, maybe. Kibbutz near Oz, which a quarter of their population was either murdered or held hostage, and they still have more than 20 hostages. They're in an area, they were at Yam HaMelech, Dead Sea. They're in an area near Kiryat Gat now, trying to make a kibbutz out of apartments. Aviva doesn't want to be on Shfaim. Their children have their homes, other than their son Shai. He visits Shfaim because he's 40, their youngest is 27. A number of friends who were murdered, a number of friends, very close friends, who were still hostages, and many, many young people that Aviva, through nursery school, and she ran the children's petting zoo, they have grown up with Aviva. Losing my train of thought. An important part for me anyway. On the seventh day, which would be the list for the eighth day, on the seventh day, another member of Faraza was released. Her name is Amit Sosna. If any of you have read the New York Times interview story with Amit, she was with Keith and Aviva for a period of time. Towards the end, before she was released, she was with Keith when she was released. You read her story. Her story jives entirely with Aviva's stories over the last months. So on the seventh day, Hamas gives a list for the eighth day, and it's supposed to include only women and children. It doesn't. It includes some men. Maybe Keith? I don't know. Israel decides there's been a ceasefire for 7 days. You're breaking the agreement. We agreed on only women and children. You've broken the agreement. We're going back to war. So rather than day 8, day 9, day 10, conceivably, and maybe longer, more hostages are coming home, Israel decides we're going back to war. It wasn't a unanimous decision of the war cabinet, but in retrospect, this was Netanyahu's mindset and the defense minister Gallant's mindset. We need to crush Hamas, and we're not going to crush Hamas by not shooting and having hostages returned. So we're back at war. Aviva's at home. Within 2 weeks, there's an opportunity to go to the United States. The forum sent more than 160 delegations abroad, most of them to the United States. During that time, during that 4 months, the government sent 20 delegations through the foreign ministry with a message of not necessarily the hostages. The delegations from the forum were hostages. So they're sending a delegation 2 weeks after Aviva was released to the United States, to DC, and hoping that at least the Americans would be with American citizenship. Aviva's South African Israeli. But because of Keith, she's considered part of the American citizens, that there'd be an opportunity to meet Blinken again. Aviva had not met because she was a hostage when he was here, and Bill Burns, CIA, and conceivably President Biden. So Aviva's saying to us, I want to go. And I, anyway, am saying, Aviva, it's 12 hours on an airplane to New York, and she knows what it is. And another flight to DC, and you may not see anyone, you may not meet anyone. No, I'm doing whatever I can to help Keith come home. I'm going. I was in Gaza for 51 days. I could be in an airplane for 12 hours. Aviva then and today does not go anywhere without one of the kids, usually one of the daughters, Ilan or Shir, or his sister, Siona. For many, many weeks, even to go to the bathroom in her daughter's house on Kibbutz Gazit. She wanted somebody to be outside the door or to take a shower. But she's getting on an airplane and she's flying to Washington, D.C. And in the end, everything came together, and the American families did meet with President Biden in the White House. He hugged her. She hugged him. Again, I don't know that because of the trauma and the situation, and even under best of times, I don't know that Keith's family can truly appreciate what it is that the American government has stepped up so strongly, and President Biden just won't let go of, I need to get the Americans and all the hostages home. I need that to happen. And Aviva tells story that, he gave them candies for the grandchildren from the White House and the Oval Office, and she meets with Bill Burns, the head of the CIA, and she's telling him, I was a hostage in Gaza, you need to know this and you need to know that, and you need to get my husband out. I don't understand why it's taking so long. And that continues to be her message with whoever she can speak to. And she and we have lost faith in our own government, and it's absurd that we have to speak to the United States and apologize for our own government and beg them to move our own government to a place that will allow the hostages to be returned. Next week is 6 months. It's unthinkable. We have no idea where Keith is. Before Aviva was released, the Army gave us a sign of life for Keith and Aviva. That just meant that they picked up some audio, something. They couldn't tell us where or what, or chatter on Hamas cell phones or I don't know what. But they tell us that they don't know where Keith is. Keith is alive. That's what we believe. We continue to have hope because we have to have hope. We continue to speak to whoever we can speak to. Netanyahu yesterday finally spoke with families of soldiers, including the Chen family, and everyone knows Ty is not alive. And the message they got was Netanyahu basically saying, it's good that I'm not a family of a hostage because I can think more clearly, and you have to understand our only mission is to destroy Hamas, and that's what will bring security to Israel and your loved ones home. He obviously doesn't say your loved ones home alive. So as of yesterday, late afternoon, early evening, that's where he's at, and we are very upset. The whole country is traumatized. The whole country is going through a nervous breakdown. There's tens of thousands of people who can't go back to their homes in the north and the south. And we're talking about Haredim that do the army or don't do the army, or dogs that need help on the border with Gaza because no one's living there anymore, and Israelis are looking for some sort of routine and normalcy, which also means that the Knesset next week goes on their spring break. There's a war, and there's hostages, and there's people who don't have homes, and our Knesset is going on their spring break because they work very hard, and we should be thanking them. Sorry, that was a little angst. Questions?
And we know that because we've been sitting at our son has been going for months now, on Mondays to sit in on the Knesset, and Lee just started agreeing to go 2 weeks ago, and
We
it's
speak
like
to
another-
committees before they get into their agenda.
it's like
Everyone in the world should go to Knesset Yisrael, but Israelis, and you all in particular, the Jewish diaspora, should go to the Knesset and feel where this country is at. It's not something new. It was going on for months before October 7th. We're in a bad way, this country. Sorry.
Yes.
Questions?
So, and the bus coming here, our Chaim, our educator who's with us, talked a little bit about what Aviva has been telling people about women's experiences in Gaza. And I wonder if you could share some of that with us.
Aviva spoke to the Knesset. It took Aviva weeks before she caught up on the 51 days that she wasn't in Israel. She came back, like she was on another planet, and she came back to a country that wasn't the country that she was kidnapped from. And we were told by the social worker that you don't ask questions. When Aviva is prepared to talk, she'll talk. She does see someone, not enough. She says, I don't have time for that. When Keith comes home, I will. So she's opened up, spoke at the Knesset. I would suggest that those of you who haven't and can read the interview with Amit Sosna. She speaks to all of what Aviva witnessed. Aviva says, I am luckily too old. I did not experience anything on my body myself. Psychologically, and the feeling of we're going to die today or tomorrow, not getting food, she saw enough to understand that young women are abused. I add to that, and now she does, that men are also, in particular young men, he's going to be 65 in a month, are victims. It can be physically touching, or it can be, Keith very early on was told, you're to shave your entire body. If you won't, we will. I'm not shaving my body. No, we're religious and you need to do that to be clean. Well, that borders on sexual assault, I would say. Your whole body, all the way. So she has very clear messaging, and there's no reason to doubt it. And as more women hostages are opening up, it's the same stories. Story's not a nice word to describe that, right? It's the same reality that they are reporting.
I have a question about the forum. I really don't know much about the missing family forum. So this existed before hostages were taken? No. So who are these people that came together? You said it was
Just
lawyers?
people.
These are people that were they and the reform movement in Israel to be given the mandate to run the country. We would have an Israel that is thriving, and an Israel that we are all very proud of. They were, one pretty high-powered lawyer in particular had a cousin who was kidnapped, and he brought together, first off, he got 7 floors in a very high-powered business lawyer's office next to the museum in Tel Aviv, next to the Hostage Square, and he brought with him some lawyers. They provided 7 floors. If you take our offices, you do whatever you need to do. He brought an ex-Mossad, ex-General Security Services, Shabak, ex-diplomats. He brought together people who were not in the government, who had experience with the Gilad Shalit negotiations and the Ron Arad negotiations, and just people with vast experience over all aspects of life, health, and because it was a war, and because businesses were closed, and because schools, universities were closed, all of these young, cutting-edge human beings who wanted to do something came together, and very quickly it was thousands of people raising money, giving up their time, and just organizing these delegations, getting to the Pope, getting to the administration of the United States through us, through the American citizens, but making all of that happen, making press conferences happen. A month ago,
All the printing of
Yeah,
the T-shirts.
The
It's
swag.
like
the logos and
you
everything.
just ask them and you get it.
those signs
Right.
up
It's
there, the ribbons.
But they came up with the logo and all that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they have a creative, they have a social, they have a aspect of a business, of a nonprofit. Everything necessary to move us and keep moving us. They make no decisions for the families. You know, we're now a much smaller group, an active group than we were, but everything, they bring resources and they bring information and they suggest activities, and then we vote on it. For the most part, it's a pretty big majority deciding to go somewhere, but it's never a consensus. Within the group now, there is a group that one of the families lives in Kiryat Arba, settlement next to Hebron, ultra-Orthodox settlers. Their son, who is not in that path anymore, was at the music festival with his girlfriend, a young woman named Noah Argamani. Her mom is the Chinese national, who amazingly is still alive, terminal cancer. So they were at the festival. His parents and his uncle and a brother, if he needs to pay the price, then that's what we have to do for Israel. We have a history of thousands of years, and we'll have a history of another 1,000 years, and you have to pay, and he will, as in if he has to die, their son, then so be it. Destroying Hamas and to the point of resettling Gaza that's what needs to be done. There's a minority who goes down and blocks trucks with humanitarian aid going into Gaza. As much as we try to say if humanitarian aid doesn't get into Gaza, then the hostages are not getting anything. You say Hamas is taking everything, then okay, Hamas is taking, then maybe it's getting to the hostages as well. No. They're our enemy. The United States is our enemy, basically. The way they're behaving. So the forum reorganized from the beginning of January. They kind of did it from February back to be an NGO, an official. So they have ways to, and they did before, donating from the United States, tax deductible. Within Israel, tax deductible. Israelis can get 35% back on donations that they make to an NGO that has been signed off on by the income tax people. Just so you know, all of that goes through the Vadat Safim of the Knesset. The Finance Committee of the Knesset signs off on every nonprofit that can be certified to have tax deductible certification. And that gets very political. The Finance Committee is run by Gafni. He's a Haredi who he didn't himself say, we'd rather leave Israel than serve in the army, or we'd rather be dead than serve in the army, but politics. The forum works very, very hard not to be politically identified, but that's impossible because the government makes it political. This yellow band all of a sudden becomes political because people who want to have elections are wearing the yellow band and saying the hostages need to come home. So then we're being accused of wanting to get rid of Netanyahu. Forum tries to push to keep us on message and to get to Israeli media, but this is not political. This is bring human beings home, those who are alive, and those who are not, to be buried as they deserve in Israel.
Magal Sagur.